Board and welcome, Kelly. It's
Thank
off
you,
to you.
Allison. Thanks everyone for joining. This is hopefully going to be a very straightforward and simple conversation we're going to have. I will take questions throughout. You can ask your child specific or client specific questions. And if they're more complex, I may redirect you towards the end. But as she said, we're going to discuss behavior, some evidence-based procedures. I am going to sneak in some values in here. This is something that I'm super passionate about. And then we'll just kind of wrap it up with some takeaways and questions and answers. So, as she said, I'm a behavior analyst. I've been a behavior analyst for over a decade. I have a wide variety of clinical experience in home settings, in out of district placement schools, in clinical settings, consulting, you name it, all ages, from early intervention up through adulthood, as well as in juvenile detention centers too. So I have a variety of experience working with a variety of different types of populations. So it's really nice to be able to pass some information forward to you guys. So ABA is considered the science of behavior change. There's a lot of jargon that goes involved with it, but basically it's human behavior and how we can make changes to it that are more positive, more enjoyable, and allow more access to a higher quality of life. So now that we know what ABA is, behavior. When you hear the word behavior, typically people think of maladaptive behaviors or behaviors that are interfering, maybe dangerous or interruptive, things like that. But behavior is actually just anything you do, literally anything. Blinking is a behavior, talking is a behavior, walking is a behavior, raising your hand to ask a question is a behavior. Yes, yelling is a behavior, hitting is a behavior. So is laughing. So behavior is anything and everything that people do. And when we're looking at behaviors, we're looking to change things that will move our clients or our children into more of a fulfilling life. So there's two categories of behavior that we consider in behavioral analysis. The first is operant behavior, which is behavior that's learned. And I put something in here and not always taught, because I want you to not take any context to this that your child is engaging in maybe a high magnitude dangerous behavior. It wasn't taught, right? That wasn't something that someone was like, hey, try this. Okay, so I want to make that distinction really early on. Behavior is learned and it can be acquired through lots of different opportunities, through direct teaching, like in school, where you're teaching your kids to write numbers and letters and how to do those pre-academic skills, organization, and all of that. But it can also just be through rules. You can set a rule like don't touch the stove, it's hot. So you can learn a behavior by following instruction and knowing the rule without ever actually having to touch the hot stove, right? You can trust your parents. Oh, it's hot, I'm not going to touch it. And then the other way is through coming in contact with contingencies, with a consequence. And I think that word gets looped up again with negativity. Oh, I don't want a consequence. Don't punish me, or I'm going to get in trouble. That's not what consequence means in this context. Consequence is just simply something that happens immediately after a behavior. So, coming into contact with some things like raising your hand and getting called on and getting praised in class, that's a consequence. So, you might be more likely to raise your hand in future opportunities. So we can learn behavior through lots of different ways. We can also derive behavior through relations we make in our mind. An example that I heard recently was a type of fish. They said, what was it? It's a Mexican walking fish. Now, without knowing what that is, you can likely derive that it is either from or exists in Mexico, because you know about Mexico, you know that it's a different country. And then you might also derive that it can walk, because I said walking and you know what walking is. And then a fish, you might say, okay, it's probably in water. So it might have some legs or arms or something that can move it in a form that looks like walking. So we can derive all of these relations to produce a response. So those are different ways that you can learn behaviors. And like I said, not always directly taught. The other type of behavior are the unlearned behaviors. We call them respondent, reflexive. It's just built in biological responses, like blinking your eyes, breathing. When you're a little baby and you come out with, I think this is the Monroe reflex, or maybe that's on your feet when they clench like this. This one is, okay. But these are responses that they don't need to be taught. They don't need to know any other relations to derive connections. It's just something that every human being who comes with a healthy anatomy is able to do. So those are the two types of behaviors, the two categories. Any questions? All right. I'm going to just ask because it's so much information. So I want to not get too ahead of myself while we're talking here. All right. So as I said, behaviors occur based on antecedents, behaviors, and consequences. So right now we're going to be focusing, and for the remainder of our conversation, we're going to be focusing on those operant behaviors or those learned behaviors, those behaviors that you acquired through direct instruction, through modeling, through your experiences, etc. So every behavior in this category has an antecedent, which is just something that happens right before the behavior occurs. And then the behavior occurs. Following that, there's a consequence, as I mentioned in my previous slide. So here's just some very quick examples. An alarm clock beeps. That's the antecedent. So there's an environmental change outside of you. And then you get out of bed, you turn the alarm clock off, the noise stops. So the behavior occurred, and there occurred because of the stimulus in the environment being manipulated or changing. There was a change in the environment that evoked the behavior. Another one, your stomach growls, you eat a sandwich, you're not hungry anymore. You're late to work, you're speeding, you get pulled over and get a ticket. And then you're less likely to speed again in the future, right? Because you don't want to have to pay the ticket or the fines, insurance, premiums going up, and all of that. Another example, Jason is whining for a snack. His babysitter gives him a snack, so he stops whining. So as you can see, our behaviors happen because something happened first, whether it was internal or external. And for our purposes, we're going to talk about external environments, things that we can see, things that we can observe, things that we can, move and change a bit. So all of these examples, minus the stomach one, that's kind of an internal thing there. But our external changes in the environment, something happens. So then a behavior occurs. After the behavior occurs, something else immediately happens. And what happens immediately following that behavior is going to determine whether that child or individual is going to do that behavior again. All right, so A, B, C. Something happens, behavior occurs, something else happens. Very simple. Now, when we're talking with individuals who have a diagnosis of autism, there's a lot of language that gets thrown out there, behaviors that are targeted for increase or decrease, maladaptive or interfering behaviors, socially significant behaviors. And I just wanted to clarify this language so that you can apply it to your child and your experience. So interfering behavior or maladaptive, those words can be used interchangeably. It's when a child is engaging in some type of behavior that is disrupting the environment, and it is denying them access or limiting their access to like homeostasis, to a baseline of okay, I'm ready, I'm safe, I'm calm, I'm ready to learn, or I'm ready to play, whatever it may be. So if a child is yelling or flopping on the floor, that would be interfering, because while they're yelling, they obviously cannot be appropriately eating their breakfast or something, right? So these are the behaviors that we target for decrease. Maladaptive or interfering behaviors we target for decrease. A huge component of what is considered a maladaptive or interfering behavior is what is considered socially significant to you. And that is completely and totally individualized for each family. There's religious considerations, there's cultural considerations, there's financial considerations, there's lots of economic and just considerations on what the parents have as important to them. So this is where the values piece comes in, and I'm going to talk again about this towards the end of the training. But there are some pretty standard socially significant behaviors that we can all kind of categorize and agree upon that are worthy of intervening. And those are kind of the more interfering behaviors like self-injury, aggression, property destruction, things of that nature. Those are really socially impactful, not just for the learner, client, or student, but also for others around them. So those are behaviors that are pretty universally socially significant. But on the other hand, stimming or stereotypy, there's different language for it, but when a child or an individual is engaging in non-functional repetitive movements, maybe it's hand flapping, maybe it's rocking, maybe it's tapping, things of that nature. Some people are really upset by those things and they don't want their child doing it. Some people don't mind and they're like, it's not interfering. They're fine, they're happy, it doesn't bother me none. So if it doesn't bother you and it's not interfering with their access to reinforcement, it's not interfering with their ability to receive an education, make friends, have a job, things like that. If it's not interfering with their life, then it's not socially significant for that family. So I want you to keep that in mind as you're talking to people about what behaviors you want to change and understand that you have the right to advocate for your child and to advocate for the socially significant behaviors that are meaningful to you. The last piece I'd like to discuss here is targeted behaviors for increase. We'll get more into it, but you should never, almost never, decrease a behavior without teaching a functionally equivalent replacement behavior. A lot of words for saying if the child currently yells to get them what they want, then you need to teach them something else to do to get what they want. Okay. So you can't just take something away, then the child's left with nothing. So we need to look at functional alternatives for them to either release that emotion or to communicate a need or a want or a desire. So we're always looking to increase if we're decreasing. You should never just be decreasing. If you're decreasing, you should also be simultaneously working to increase. Okay, any questions there? Excellent. All right. Let me just see. Okay. Antecedent behavior consequence. I want to be clear that I understand, as well as a behavior analyst, I'm a mother of 3 young daughters. So I have a lot of experience in my daily life and in my work and clinical life about what behavior looks like. And it doesn't typically just look like a behavior, right? There's usually some leading up here. We see this little steps going on. Usually there's some signs of agitation. Maybe it's fidgeting, maybe it's lack of eye contact, maybe it's decreased engagement, things like that. So there's always a little something off, and then a little bit more usually, maybe even a little bit more before the whole, the behavior that you're looking at for a decrease happens. So it's important to note that because while we're teaching and learning about these behaviors, we're working at the precursor level, at the first step of that behavior to try to prevent that last step from that behavior from happening at all. So we're not working once the behavior occurs, we're working before the behavior occurs. Once the behavior has occurred, it's not a time to teach. Okay, let me see if I can slide down. Seems to be frozen. Oh, hold on. Okay, here we go. So why do we do what we do? Why do we engage in behavior? You've heard me throw out the term function a few times now. And there are 4 main functions that we consider in behavioral analysis. Escape is one, and that includes avoidance or delay. Sensory access is another, and that is something that is like internally stimulating, or is at like sensory input. Maybe it's like squeezes or cold or hot, things like that. So, or some sort of internal like humming or singing, something internal that is helping an individual regulate. Tangible, give me the cookies. It's something that is external that you want. An iPad, food, a game. It's a tangible item that you can hold in your hands. And then attention. I feel this one to my soul. I'm sure you do too if you are a parent. Mom, 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 what? And then you yell at your kid, what? What do you want? Boom, they got your attention. Um, so attention is another reason that we engage in behaviors. We're going to stay here for a minute to talk about each and give some examples. In daily life, escaping a behavior may look something like you present homework to a child, or you simply say, hey, it's time to get your homework done. And they swipe the homework off the table or they run away. Okay. It's pretty obvious in that situation that they're not wanting to do their homework, right? Another example that we use, maybe your boss calls you at 4:30 p.m. and your day ends at 5. You're like, I'm not answering that call. You're delaying whatever task your boss is going to add to your list until tomorrow. So we can engage in these escape and avoidant delayed behaviors just to get out of the negative situation, or because we're doing something that we like. Maybe the individual is playing a game and they're really into it, or they're in the middle of a movie and you're like, hey, we need to stop that to go do the homework. And they're like, no, no thanks, I don't want to. So they're trying to escape the homework to stay where they are. Tangible. Um, I mean, that's pretty easy. They want the tablet, and you said, no tablet today, I'm sorry. And then, someone flops on the floor and cries, right? So they're doing that in hopes that they would get the tablet back, or they're doing that because they were denied access to the tablet. Sensory, I think I gave examples of this as well. But I have one of my daughters engages in some stereotypy, and she does it when she's visually excited, and she doesn't even know that she's doing it when she's doing it. And it's not interfering at all. So it's not something that we focus on at home very much. Um, but it's just there's something outside of her blowing bubbles or listening to someone talk. She'll look at their mouth move, and as a result, that kind of triggers her to engage in her stereotypy. So that's something that happens a lot with children who have regulation issues and things like that. And then attention. Sometimes people just want to be talked to or to socialize. Sometimes they want, snuggles with mom or dad, things like that. So, as a way to get our attention, sometimes we see maladaptive behaviors. Sometimes you're on the phone and you're cooking dinner and you're doing a million things, and your children are trying to get your attention, but you're simply not available. So then they start engaging in higher rates of behavior. These are things that are just kind of staples for what people do. Now, to identify the function of behavior, usually something called an FBA or an FA is conducted by a behavior analyst to get enough data to confidently say that it's likely these are the maintaining variables for the behaviors we're targeting for decrease. It's so important to know the function, because once you know the function, then you can pick a replacement behavior. So grabbing mom's attention, instead of yelling at mom, you can teach them to tap their shoulder. And then you can extend that by teaching them to wait and things like that. Asking for a tangible, maybe it's an individual who doesn't have great effective communication skills. So maybe you need to look at, getting a communication assessment done using PECs or an AAC device, different modes of communication so that the individual can communicate what they want specifically. Escape and avoidant delay. A lot of times there's reward that is correlated with this particular function. It's something like first then. All right, first you have to do this for 1 minute, and maybe it's a task they really hate. So it's only 15 seconds, and then you systematically increase it, right? So you're trying to get them to engage versus disengage. So you're trying to increase their engagement with whatever activity they're trying to escape or delay. So you can work with your clinicians on access to that. And sensory, as I said, some behaviors are completely safe and harmless and not socially valid to intervene on for some families, like hand flapping or humming or tapping or picking your nails or things like that, rocking. Sometimes those are just fine and safe and it's not a big deal. Other sensory seeking behaviors are more gross motor and can be considered more dangerous. Some people may engage in like hair pulling or self-biting, things like that. And those are obviously, if they're getting some sort of sensory input for that, it's dangerous. You want to help keep their bodies safe. So that's a time when you would intervene on sensory. So then you need to look at a functional equivalent replacement behavior so they can still get that release and that comfort that they're looking for as far as sensory input is concerned, but doing it in a safe way. All right. So you may ask if your child is engaging in specific behaviors and you're like, okay, so it has this function, but if it's clearly not enjoyable, like I'm watching them cry and yell on the floor, why does it keep happening? Why are they doing it? The simple answer is because it's being reinforced. And this is not any attack on anyone saying that you are increasing this behavior or anyone's causing it. Its reinforcement is just simply that the child is gaining access to something they want, even though they had to go through maybe a challenging time to get it. So reinforcement increases the likelihood that a behavior will happen again in the future. We can go back to the beginning where I talked about the alarm clock. The alarm clock beeped, so the individual wakes up and turns it off. Now I know the alarm clock is off. I'm out of bed, I'm ready to start my day, and that annoying beeping is gone. Okay, so I'm more likely to do that in the future. Tomorrow, the alarm clock beeps. I'm probably going to stand up and tap the button so I can get up and go to school. Putting on your seatbelt is another example. And these two examples actually are negative reinforcement. Negative does not mean bad. Positive does not mean good. Negative means subtracting. Think of a minus symbol. And positive means adding. Think of an addition symbol. So in the alarm example, when I turned the alarm off, I took away, right, minus symbol, that loud, annoying beeping sound. And because I had that reinforcement of avoiding that loud, annoying beeping sound, I'm more likely to turn my alarm off in the future. Same with a seatbelt, same idea. They put that beeping in, so you're more likely to buckle up so that the alarm stops. So negative does not mean bad. It just means simply taking something away. That is for good, actually. And positive reinforcement is adding something to the environment, doing something that is good. So maybe you call a friend and they just thank you. And they're like, oh, I really needed to talk to a friend today. Thank you. You're more likely to call a friend again in the future. Another example would be asking appropriately for a snack, being like, hey, mom, I really want a piece of chocolate. Could I have a piece of chocolate, please? Yeah, you can have one piece of chocolate versus, I want chocolate. Give me chocolate now. No, you're not going to get chocolate because that's not how you ask for chocolate appropriately, right? So you can reinforce and honor appropriate requests from your children, appropriate behavior from your children without even programming for it, right? You can just catch your kids in the act of doing what you want them to do, or catch the act of them doing something new, and you can reinforce it however they like. And I think we're going to get into this a little bit, no, a little bit more. Reinforcement is individual. So coffee might be a reinforcer for me. Tea might be a reinforcer for you. Tickles might be a reinforcer for a 2-year-old, probably not for a 12-year-old, right? Bouncing on a trampoline might be fun for a child. It might not be as fun for an adult. Playing a board game, giving a high five. A high five might be very aversive to someone who doesn't like to be touched or who doesn't like loud noises. So we can't just assume that, yeah, woohoo, I praise them, great job, that that's going to be reinforcing for them. You have to see what your child really likes, what they really enjoy. And that's what you're going to use when you catch them in the good acts. So without even teaching, you can go ahead and start reinforcing your children's behavior by just catching them and honoring them in the good acts and honoring them in the way that is unique and meaningful to each child within your home. Okay, questions on reinforcement? So, what can I do to see more of the desirable behaviors in my child? We're going to break each of these down as we go forward. So, I'll just continue on to the next slide. These are all pretty much antecedent strategies, by the way, where antecedent is the things, again, remember that happen before the behavior, and you're intervening before the behavior. Imagine if someone came to your house and said, riled you up, got you all angry, got in a fight, and then said, okay, I want to teach you how to speak French. Are you going to be, yeah, sure, let's sit down and learn? It's not going to happen, right? So when your child is in a state of distress or dis-ease or unregulated, then that is not a time to teach. That is not a learning moment. If they had just had a big behavior and they're coming down from it and they're de-escalating and re-regulating, that is not a time to teach. That is a time to just support and show compassion for your kid. And during the behavior, of course, it's to keep them safe. That's your priority there.
I think we have a question.
Yes.
So, Kelly, would a child talking about a certain subject, for example, Godzilla, constantly be considered a form of stimming? Just curious. Great question.
It is a good question. I
Oh,
suppose it depends on the function of the behavior, right? So if they're talking about it because they want to do something with it, as far as playing with, a figurine, watching movies, or they want to talk to you about it, then I think that would be something that is just preferred and they're fixated on. And that's something you would then work with expanding their repertoire of conversations, or maybe like putting pockets of the day where it's Godzilla talk time. You could put a clock out and say like after school Godzilla talk time and things like that. If it was, socially significant, listening about Godzilla all day often could be very, I imagine, irritating, right? It could be a little bit maybe annoying even. So if that's socially significant for you and you want to address it, then I think you should talk to your clinician. It's a good idea. Of course, prioritizing those more dangerous behaviors prior to things like this, but it's definitely could be a stim, but you'd have to see the function before you intervene on it.
hmm. All right. Very good.
All right. So what can I do to see more of the desirable behaviors? Intervening before the behavior we talked about. All right, setting events. Here we go. Setting up the environment for success. Like I said, I'm a mother. I have 3 young daughters. I know how much work it is to just maintain your house, forget about and your job and your friendships and your partnerships and all of that. Forget about adding more to your plate. Um, Taking that under advisement, though, I think that if you have time to manipulate your environment a little bit, day by day, room by room, or activity by activity, it's going to ultimately, maybe it's more work in the front end, but it's going to be a lot more rewarding on the back end. So, things that you can do first is learn what setting events impact your child and what triggers your child. So, a setting event, what I mean by that is something that happens. Maybe it's external, maybe it's, a family matter happened, maybe someone passed away, maybe mom's sick, maybe the child is sick, maybe they didn't sleep good that night, right? There are things that would just affect anybody. It's a setting event. It's like, you know what, today's not a good day. And sometimes there's no real reason for it. Sometimes we wake up and we're just like, ugh, I'm not really feeling it today. I don't know why. I can't tell you specifically, but it's an off day for me. Of course, the same is true for our children. So I think taking that into consideration and adjusting your expectations for the day is going to benefit you and your child. All right. So take into consideration those setting events so that you can accurately modify your expectations for the coming day. The other thing is knowing what triggers your child. Parents know this. You guys maybe don't know it specifically with function and in a behavioral analytic, puzzle here, but you know what sets off your child. For me, if I am running late and I'm anxious, my anxiety goes up, and I tell my kids, we're late, we gotta go. Immediately, every single time they melt down. Immediately, right? You think that I would learn to not do that and to take an alternative approach. And it's taking me so many times because I'm only concerned about my anxiety and me being late that I forget what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. So I had to go and reset the environment so that I am set up for success and therefore they are set up for success. So sometimes our triggers are our own reactions to things. Sometimes triggers are not that, though. Sometimes triggers are something like, hey, you have to eat your vegetables, right? Or you have to take your medicine, and they don't like the taste of it, or they don't like the vegetables, the texture. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's something like homework, or it's time for bed, or we got to turn the TV off. Maybe it's transitioning, like it's time to go to school, it's time to come home from school, things like that. So these can all be triggers for your children. And now that I'm saying it, if you're thinking about it, you're going to start noticing patterns, and what triggers your child. So once you can identify that, I recommend just taking a couple of days, and noticing, not engaging, not overly parenting, keeping your child safe and loved, of course, but just kind of observing and being like, oh, whoa, 3 days in a row, the same thing, set them off, right? So if you can start noticing these patterns, then you can start making meaningful changes within the house. So we're going to go through what this might look like. So, some triggers, common ones, is if asked to do something that a child doesn't want to do, maybe it's cleaning, homework, bathing, etc. First of all, hopefully you have some sort of reinforcement system established within the home. And if you're working with clinicians, then you definitely do. It would be unethical to not have that. So hopefully you have some sort of reinforcement system. If you don't, you can make it up on the fly. You can say, hey, um, I have this really cool puzzle. Maybe it's Godzilla. We'll use the Godzilla example. Hey, I got this really cool video of Godzilla that I just found out. We got to do some homework first, though. Are you interested in the Godzilla? Yeah, I'm interested. Great. Let's watch it after we finish 5 minutes of homework. Okay. So you can increase or establish or introduce reinforcement on the fly. You don't need to have anything specifically programmed and things like that. So you can just say, what do you want to work for? Or like, hey, we got to do something. I know it's not your favorite, but let's try to make it as fun as we can. And at the end, we're gonna, have hot chocolate or go outside and play together for whatever it means for them. Something else you can do, just right where you are without any programming, is allow them. Yeah. Was there a question? No. Okay.
No, I
Another
think we
thing.
just need to, I think we just need to mute. It just came in. Somebody just came in.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, we just have to mute.
All right. The other thing you can do for, if you're asking your child to do something that they don't want to do, is allow them to choose the non-essential components. Like maybe it's folding laundry. Maybe that's a task you're working with your teen child's on, or your 10-year-old, whatever age. Um, where do you want to fold the laundry? Do you want to fold it sitting on the couch, sitting on the floor, standing at the kitchen table? Do you want to fold it in your bedroom? Do you want me to inside out the clothes for you? Do you want me to help you and I can do the shirts and you can do the pants? Do you want to fold it first and put it away later? Right? So, like, the task is folding laundry. It doesn't really matter where it's done or how it's done as long as it gets done neatly. So, you can utilize this and allow your child to choose. Having choice and having power is so important for all people, in particular, someone who's neurodivergent, who seems to have a little bit less access to their own autonomy. So whenever we can give that back to anybody, I'm all for it. Another example might be you're working on leisure skills and you want to start putting board games in your child's repertoire. So you can, which board game do you want to play? Who do you want to play with? Which character do you want to be? So you can allow them to choose and manipulate things. Maybe it is eating a vegetable. Well, do you want to eat the vegetable sitting down at the dinner table? Do you want to eat it standing up over here? Do you want to eat it outside? Do you want to take a bite and then, play basketball for 2 minutes and then take another bite? So you can work with them to allow choice. Something that people get tripped up on is asking yes or no questions. Like, hey, do you want to do your homework? I think 90% of the population would be like, no, I'm good. Right? So if you ask the question and they say no, what are you going to do? So I think you need to do your best to avoid yes or no questions and simply just state what needs to happen. Right? This is what needs to happen. It's non-negotiable. It needs to happen. It's not a yes or a no. I'm not asking if you want to, but I am asking how, or I am asking where, right? Or I am asking what materials you want to use. If there is an alternative, and maybe it's chores, or maybe it is a leisure skill that you're working on, then you can offer choices, but be careful of how many choices you offer. I would simply offer two choices. Never leave an open-ended question like, what do you want to do? I want to stay on my iPad, Mom. Oh, shoot. Okay. Right. So you want, and then you're going to have to leave and let them be on their iPad because you just asked them what they wanted to do and they told you. So, right. Maybe you need to wait 5 minutes and come back with the same question, but ask two choices. Do you want to play, I don't know, sorry, or do you want to play Hi-Ho Cheerio? And then they have a choice, but it's more succinct for them. Triggers and settings, if you are denied or delayed access to something. So, they want more candy, they want more screen time, love to go swimming. I put buying a Stanley in here because my 6-year-old that's her obsession. She wants a Stanley. She's in first grade and her friends have Stanleys. And I said no. So denied access to her Stanley. If an item is not available, I just simply say no, but I offer an alternative. This is the same context of you're not working to decrease a behavior unless you're working to increase one, right? So if I say no, you can't have a Stanley, and she's like, well, how am I going to drink my water, Mom? What am I going to do? I'm a peasant and I have to use the bubbler. Um, no, it's an alternative. No, I'm sorry, you can't have a Stanley, but you have this beautiful pink water bottle you can drink of. And if you don't like that one, I also have this blue one you can choose. No problem, right? And that's kind of what it is. So if maybe it's something more like I want candy and you say no after dinner. Well, after dinner is maybe it's an hour away, maybe it's 4 hours away. Now this individual is in their head, and if they don't know how to tell time, they're just like, Mom said later, Mom said later, Mom said later. When is later? When is later? I want the candy. I want the candy. I want the candy. So they begin to perseverate, which could be, again, the Godzilla thing. It's just a repetitive thought that goes on in their head, that's kind of all consuming. So if something's not available, if it's not available within the next, say, 5 or so minutes, just say no. No, I'm sorry. We can't have that right now. But what you can have is popcorn or an apple or grapes, right? Always offer an alternative so that they're not left perseverating on this thing that they just got denied access to. Transitioning. This is a big one. This is a very common trigger for a lot of people on the spectrum and not. So first, you can give verbal warnings. You can say, hey, we're going to be going to school in 10 minutes. And you want to be careful and know your kid, right? Because you don't want them to be perseverating for 10 minutes about going to school and then therefore off task. So you need to see what works with your child. So these are just some examples. You can use visual or audible timers. I let my girls set a timer on Alexa, and I usually let them choose the time. But again, I only give them two options. I'll say something like, do you want 5 minutes or 8 minutes left to play or whatever they're doing? And then they'll say, oh, 8 minutes. I say, no problem. You set the timer. They say, Alexa, set an 8-minute timer. Make sure she doesn't go off. And then that's it. The timer goes off and hopefully, right, they go on their merry little way. The other thing is preparing things that they will need ahead of time based on your child's skill level. So it may be something like transitioning to school and packing their own lunch is just, it's off the table. It's not something you're going to ask them to do. It's not the battle you're fighting today. So you pack the lunch for them, put it in their bag, have things ready to go and easily accessible for them. Maybe you are working on packing your lunch. Maybe you leave the lunchbox open with their snack next to it, so they have to put it in and zipper it, right? Maybe you're working on them choosing their own lunch, so then they have to go in the fridge and make their own sandwich and things like that. So meet your child where they're at, help them along the way, and set them up for success where they are right here. And then you can increase or decrease your support over time. Setting events, I mean, sick, not enough sleep. These are just basic things that you already do. You're taking it easy. Your lower demands. They have more free access to the preferred items they like. You're speaking slower and calmer. Maybe you're helping them where typically you wouldn't. When these setting events are really impacting an individual's day, um, it's just you got to kind of meet them where they're at, and maybe it's an off day. Maybe today is not a day where we're striving for a lot of behavior increase or behavior decrease. We're just gonna stay calm and stay cool and collected, and that is just fine. All right, these are lots of examples. Has anybody used these, found them challenging or helpful?
I was just saying in the chat that I like your idea about using Alexa as a timer because I use timers a lot. But then I'm always having to go on my phone and set it, and then it's still me being the one to be like, okay, the timer's going off. So that's good.
Good. Awesome. I can't see the chat right now. My view's a little um,
We use almost all of them on a daily basis with everything that he does. So, and I find that certain things will work for a while and then it doesn't really matter to him, or because it's not enough, then it doesn't work. So I have to change it up again.
mhm.
I'm always changing whatever reinforcers that we do, any of that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because it's true. What works one day or one week is not guaranteed the next. And it's something that sometimes gets overlooked in practice. We just assume that children want what they wanted last week or a month ago, but their interests change and change really quickly, honestly. So doing these quick, brief preference assessments in the morning or, immediately after school, hey, what do you want to work for today? Or what do you want your schedule to look like? And allowing them to manipulate it how they can sometimes be helpful. All
Which,
right, we still have, go ahead.
which kind of goes back to your other point, right? Where we change our behavior and their
Mhm.
behavior will change. So Marie's probably done this a while, so she knows when something isn't working, she changes her behavior and it affects. So it's so interesting how over longevity, all the concepts you're talking about over time, how it changes and how you have to parent differently and always be kind of aware of that.
Yeah. I think it's what we're learning or discussing today is really just a foundation that you have to just stick with, right? And know that it's going to change and adjust frequently. It's a working model, right? It's continually working. You're never done. Your children are never done learning. You're never done learning. So I think it's something you just need to understands like this is what I'm doing. I'm attending to my child, I'm attending to the environment, and I'm making changes on the fly that have their best interests at mind. And again, there's off days. Enjoy your off days. Use your off days. Have off days, right? Like you too might be tired, might be sick. So those are days when maybe the kid gets more screen time or things like that. There's a well-known BCBA, Dr. Greg Hanley, who just published recent literature on you'll live to see another trial, right? So like if you reinforce the behavior, if you made a mistake, if you gave in when you weren't supposed to give in, it's just fine. It's okay. Okay? It's no problem because the next time you can do better or you can do different, right? So nothing is set in stone, nothing is ever ruined. This is a working model and it's, ebbs and flows and ebbs and flows. So I know we only have 15 more minutes, so I want to just kind of fly through some of these antecedent strategies um, that we can discuss more of. So setting up your environment, a huge one, easy one. You can do it. Go home, observe for 3 days, make some small changes. Lower this, put the junk food snacks in a higher up cabinet, or put a lock on the iPad so it shuts off. All these things you can just do. Just do one day, make one change, and see how it goes. Functional communication responding, or training, it's sometimes called. First, you have to identify the function of the behavior, which we talked about previously. Remember, it's sensory, tangible, avoidance or escape, and attention. So once you have the function, you can teach a replacement response. And we're talking specifically here with verbal behavior. Verbal does not mean vocal. It does not mean talking. Verbal means communicating in a way that somebody else can understand. So that could be using a PEC system where you're exchanging icons. It could be using an AAC device where you're tapping on icons. It could be writing, whatever, right? It's just a way to communicate someone's needs. So what we want to do is teach behavior. So I know every single time that I present homework to my child, they swipe it off the table. So what can I do so they don't swipe it anymore? Now we're just working on swiping at this time. You teach them an alternative response. You present the homework and you say, I don't want to do homework right now, right? You can just model it for them. Or you can have a little picture of a break so they can just tap it. I want a break. Yep, you got a break. You don't have to do your homework right now. So we're working on the swiping behavior first. And then once that behavior is occurring less frequently, then you can work on the engagement behavior. So right now we'll be replacing the swiping behavior with a request for a break. Once that is mastered and the person is doing it consistently and independently, then you can go on to the next step and work on actually engaging in the homework for longer durations of time. So these are good things, like I said, at the beginning of the chain of behavior. This isn't going to get them to engage in what you want them to engage in, but it will get them to stop doing the maladaptive behavior and using something that not only is more appropriate, something that you can understand. So everyone feels more safe, they can get their needs met quickly, and then you can kind of have a more homeostasis environment. I'm not going to play this video just for the sake of time, but we can come back to it at the end if we have time. Are there any questions on FCR? Okay. Schedules. This is exactly what I have in my house for my 3 kids: morning, after school, and bedtime routines. Schedules are easy to make. They are easy to use, and they don't have to be like this. You don't have to do icons and squares and be perfect. You can literally just write it. Sometimes if we don't have these available, I'll draw based on their age. I have 2 daughters that can read and 1 that can't. So I'll draw a picture of a toothbrush and then I'll put a box next to it and she'll check it off. So you don't need anything fancy. You don't need a laminator. You don't need access to anything at all. You can simply grab a napkin and a Sharpie and write out a schedule. The schedule, though, should be used on things that are consistent, things that don't change. And these are the 3 that I use: morning routine, after school routine, and bedtime routine. No matter where they are in the world, no matter who is watching them, whether it be a caregiver or a babysitter, these things are still going to happen. These are their responsibilities. These are the things that they need to be able to do either with help or independently. Another example of a schedule could be doing a complicated task. So maybe you're working on, washing dishes, doing laundry. Maybe it's homework, and the homework involves, unpacking your bag, completing the homework, putting it in the folder, putting it back in your bag, things like that. So those longer tasks that have multiple steps, a schedule can be really good for too. The thing about schedules is you don't want to rely on them forever. So you do want to try to fade them out over time so that those routines are ingrained in your child's day and they just know how to do them and they go about doing them. So you can just consider a schedule as you go. A token system, this is such an easy go-to one. I'm sure everyone has either used them or heard of them, but the tokens are kind of a way to delay that bigger reinforcement. In this example, James can stay in his seat. That's what this boy James is working on. Maybe they're doing it every minute. So he stayed in his seat for 5 consecutive minutes. Amazing. You get to eat lunch with a friend. Another example might be staying on task for homework. 1 minute, you're into star, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Excellent. You're all done with homework for today or whatever that may be. But it doesn't have to be on a minute. It could be on a task. It could be something like, did you do your 5 chores today? Or did you say 5 kind words today? Did you talk to your sister 5 times? Did you share a toy 5 times, right? Like you can use it for anything, for increasing behavior or decreasing behavior. And again, the tokens themselves are just placeholders for the cash in, which is the big prize. That's kind of what money is for us, right? Like we have money in our wallet or our bank accounts. It doesn't do anything unless we put it to work and access buying something and cashing it in. So same idea with tokens.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Quick question. Can you tell everyone about if you were going to do something like this, and you might not be able to because it might be too complicated or too many things, but about errorless learning?
Errorless learning. No,
Is
it's
it
not
too
too
much?
complicated. It's not too much. I actually presented a symposium on errorless learning. So in brief, errorless learning is a way of teaching someone so it reduces the likelihood they engage in an error. Okay, it doesn't mean that they're not going to make an error. It means that it reduces the chances of them making an error. And that's usually when you provide prompting. And that could be using vocal verbal. Maybe it's like, reading something like, what's this number? And I say 2, and then the person says 2. So I gave them the prompt of 2 immediately after my question so they can't make a mistake. Or, I mean, they could, right? But it's less likely they're going to make a mistake because I gave them the prompt. And then what you do is systematically fade that prompt over time. So next time I might say, what's that number? And instead of saying 2, I might just say t, just make the t sound. And then they would then say 2. And then moving forward from there, I would just simply say, what's the number? They would see it and independently say 2. So an ABA, errorless learning, has proven time and time again to be the most effective type of learning. The alternative to that is trial and error. So it can look a little messy. I thought of a baby eating food, when you teach like a 4-month-old when they move from liquids to solids and you have the oatmeal and they're like putting it in their mouth and it's spilling everywhere and they can't quite figure it out, right? That's kind of what trial and error can look like in practice. There's a lot of mistakes. It takes more time. There's more frustration, and it's harder for individuals across the board to learn skills without that specific direct guidance. So prompting is your friend. Prompting helps with errorless learning, and it makes skill acquisition. It makes learning new skills happen faster.
So if for the case of James in the seat, because you couldn't physically, well, you could, I guess, physically support him, but let's say, would you make that say instead of earning 5 stars, he would earn like 1 star for 1 minute and then build up to 5 stars so that he wouldn't just, okay, he does this 3 times a day and he only gets the reinforcement once a day because the other 2 times he can't sit for 5 minutes.
Yes. Okay. So what you're asking is not actually, it's a component of errorless learning, but what it is reinforcement schedule. So if you are delaying reinforcement for too long, the child's not going to be able to withstand that. So when you're running a token economy, James, can you stay in your seat? You need to take baseline data, meaning you need to observe James and see how long can James actually sit in his seat without being prompted just willy-nilly throughout the day. What's the longest duration he's ever sat in his seat? And if the longest duration is 1 minute,
Yeah.
your goal is not going to be a minute. Your goal is going to be 30 seconds.
Right. It won't be and for every second one, you break those 5 stars down into those increments. Gotcha.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly.
Thank you. Thank you. That was good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And sometimes you just use 1 star cash in, and then you add 2 stars cash in, and then you add 3 stars cash in, and then you change it from 30 seconds to a minute. So you always want to match reinforcement, again, meeting your learner where they're at. So if they can only tolerate 10 seconds of something they don't really like, then you're going to start at 8. You're not going to start at 10. You're going to start at 8 so that they're successful. And then you'll bump it up to 10, right? So you always want to start literally where they're at, not where they can be or not what they're completely capable of. You want them to have success, 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 so you can build on it and then have behavior grow faster.
Could have used you for the last, well, probably more than that, 15 years.
Thank you for your questions. I'm going to stay on at the end too. I have a little bit of time because I know we have 2 minutes left. So, behavior contract, this is for more of our advanced learners, our readers, our vocal verbal kiddos, things like that. But they are created with your child. You sit down with your buddy and you say, hey, I noticed that, you've been having a hard time with this, stomping and slamming the door or something like that, right? You haven't been doing your chores weekly and it's been really hard. What do you think? And then they might say, yeah. And so you got to get their buy-in. What do you think? What behavior do you want to work on? Do you want to do you want to play outside more? Do you want to do your homework more? Whatever it is, and try to get them on board. So they choose the behavior. They tell you what it looks like. Oh, it looks like this when I do it. And this is what I want to work on. Okay. So that's what, my tantrum looks like. What's my goal? And then again, you're setting realistic, achievable goals, meeting your kid right where they're at. Nothing too hard, nothing extra. You're starting almost easy. Like, yep, I know you can do this. This is a gimme. Next week, we're going to increase it. Next week, it's going to be a little bit harder. And the week after that, a little bit harder. So you're systematically increasing as your child's needs and skill level develops. And same thing here, they pick their own consequences. What will happen if I don't meet my goal? What reward will I get if I do meet my goal? And things like that. So you can have your child develop this. And that way too, they don't meet their goal. You can just be like, hey, remember, you signed it. I signed it. We agreed on it. And he'll be like, oh man, right? Hopefully. And then he complies with the contract that he created. With your child doing it, hopefully they create it so they will succeed. Okay. So I think we kind of already talked about all of this stuff, but when you're teaching your child, please don't teach them when they are escalated and irritated and engaging in maladaptive behavior, and don't teach them right after. You shouldn't have hit your sister, you know better, right? Let everybody, including yourself, relax. Happy, relaxed, and engage is a coined term in a particular protocol in behavioral analysis, but really, just once everyone is calm and they're able to engage and they seem more happy, that's when you teach, okay? Using the strategies aforementioned can help set up your child for success, and then live to teach another day, which I already said. We're not going to have time for this values piece, but I'll leave it up to Allison and let me know if we should end it or continue, or if people want to stay, or however you'd like to work it.
Thank you so much. I feel like we need to have a part B with you, Kelly. You're just so spectacular. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question about what you were talking about socially significant um, behaviors. When you have someone that's like 10 or 11 in that does all the stimming, or they insistent conversation about one particular subject, other kids notice it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're at the age where they think it's weird or there's something wrong with, that's the point that I'm at now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to teach my child what they're doing. I don't know if I want to teach him that they're making fun of you because you're doing that. So I just don't know what to do with that.
Okay.
Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, I would always start in the home. I would always start teaching in the home, not in the community, not at school, not at grandma's house, right? Like wherever the child resides is where the teaching should start, because you can control the most stuff there. And I would start with discrimination training, where you have some sort of visual symbol, like, a green card with Godzilla on it and a red card with like an X towards Godzilla. Like, Godzilla is available to talk, he's not, and kind of train him on that. And then I would move that out into the community and then into into the school system. And if your child's on an IEP or something like that, it's something that they should likely be able to accommodate, generalizing what you're doing at home to the school. But feel free to reach out to me and we can talk more about it.
Okay, thank you.
Wow. Kelly, thank you so, so much. So informative, so professional, so well spoken. Thank you. You're just absolutely great. And we really appreciate you being here with us tonight. Thank you all for joining. And I hope you all have a great evening and found this to be really informative and helpful, and thought definitely got a lot of things started with me thinking. So I appreciate it very, very much.
Well, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.